Good morning, John. How are you doing?
Good morning. How are you, sir?
Doing great, doing great. I can't believe it's episode 15, and I can't believe it's the end of October. Unbelievable.
Unbelievable. And this episode could not be more relevant because I understand you got a few windstorms going on there in Dallas, huh?
Yeah, it's beautiful weather, but the winds are certainly whipping up, as we say here in Texas. So, but yeah, up to 60 and 70-mile-hour gusts today, believe it or not. But
Wow. Well, if you lose power, then today's show is going to be super relevant. So,
absolutely.
I hear we got a great guest, and it's going to be from Cordova, Alaska. And just so you know, let me find my breakfast. Cordova, and I'll share with the viewers, is known for their salmon. Okay,
My goodness,
and this is absolutely amazing. Yeah,
look at that. And you just had that flown in, right, this week?
I had that flown in, yeah. So it came overnight in a freezer pack. Came in a freezer pack, and absolutely incredible. So we'll talk more about kind of Copper River smoked salmon and salmon in general, and Cordova with our guests. So who do we have on today?
Yeah, we actually have two great guests today. So we have Clay Copeland, who is the CEO of the Cordova, Alaska Electric Co-op. He also happens to be the mayor of the town. So this is going to be a great conversation with him. And then we also have Phil Gruber, who heads up energy and utilities for Hitachi Vantara. So we'd love to welcome Clay and Phil. Let's bring him on stage.
Awesome.
Good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning.
How's it going? Great. And Phil, you're out in Colorado, so it's not too early for you. But Clay, my goodness, in Alaska, it's really early.
Still dark 30.
So Clay, where exactly is Cordova when we think about like Alaska? It's pretty big, right? So where is Cordova?
So I kind of say Cordova's in the banana belt. We're a central south coast, so more than a little southeast of Nome.
That's awesome. Wow, just south, yeah. So south of Anchorage, and you guys are known as what, the largest fishing community in Alaska?
There's different measurements. It kind of depends on where the fish show up and how much. Dutch Harbor and Kodiak are generally larger ports, and they deliver a lot more fish and higher dollar value because they work more year round. Cordova right now, I think, is ranked 11th largest seafood port in the country. So for a little 2,300 people, it's a big economy.
Wow. And actually, let's put that in perspective again. I don't know if everyone heard that. 2,300 people. So that's the population. And the other thing that we were talking about is there's no roads to other places in Alaska. So the only way for you to get there really is by sea or by air, correct? So you all are really isolated.
Yeah, that's right. One if by sea, two if by air.
My goodness. And look at that. What an amazing place.
That is beautiful. So look at Clay, we obviously, we don't have you on here to talk about your amazing salmon. We'll talk about it, sure, but we want to talk a little bit about something incredibly interesting, and that's why Phil's here as well with Hitachi Vantara and Hitachi Electric is, tell us about kind of your journey. And it really started in the late 80s, early 90s with regards to an accident, and then tell us about your energy history and story.
Cordova, again, we're isolated. So we had 100% diesel generation to produce our town's electricity. And as we had problems with coastal storms and high winds like you're having, John, it's sometimes hard to get barges in and out of town, and even hard to get planes in and out of town. So we've gone through a little cycle where we couldn't get enough fuel in because of an extended coastal storm. We're having a hard time flying it in. So, and also, frankly, the power system wasn't that reliable. So the a group of concerned citizens, went to the USDA and borrowed money to purchase the electric utility from the city and form a cooperative. And they had two big goals. They wanted locally produced, reliable energy. And so they had two missions. Let's produce local energy, and let's get all our lines underground so we have a reliable electric system here.
Wow, that's incredible. That's incredible. And Phil, so you obviously, Hitachi plays a big role in this. Tell us a little bit about kind of the technology that Clay and the community there are utilizing for this sustainable electrical source.
Sure. They're using what we call a battery energy storage system, which is a type of grid edge solution. So it's the battery storage that helps regulate the energy flow from the hydro system that Cordova is using in place of their diesel generator. And it's easy to see the physical battery, but the real secret sauce in the solution is the digital automation that helps provide that optimization of the management and control of the energy flow. So making sure that the energy is flowing, effectively and in an optimized manner to make sure that the grid's resilient and is operating as efficiently as it can.
And how long did it take you guys to actually put that system in to convert from the diesel into this microgrid battery storage system?
Well, it's been a journey. When they formed the cooperative in 1978, they set out to start developing hydroelectric projects. Cordova is the last community in the coastal rainforest as you head north. So we get about 150 inches of annual precipitation. So water's our resource, and we don't have real good solid rock to build storage dams. So we had to build what we call run-of-the-river hydroelectric projects, just a surface catchment, and then we push the water through a pipe to a power plant. So we started developing our first project in about 1984, 83, 84, and we're well into the development of that first small project at Humpback Creek. Then we had the Exxon Valdez oil spill, and that really kind of it devastated our region for fisheries and so forth, and really kind of lit a fire and created that urgency and an imperative to get these hydro projects built. So we built Humpback Creek in about 1980, I think 2000. I'm sorry, in about 1991, that project went into service. We immediately pivoted to a larger project. Humpback Creek produced about 10% of our power. We immediately pivoted to a larger project, the Powell Creek Hydroelectric Project, and started permitting and development on that in the early 90s, and then started construction and completed that project in 2002. And that took us to about 70%, as high as 78% renewable.
Oh wow! Oh wow! And one of the things that we had talked about earlier as well is that you do have fluctuations in your population based on the fishing season. And you mentioned that from like May to August, September, even sometimes going into October, that you have more people when there's fishing season and less, right? So there's got to be that flexibility and the ability to scale up and scale down. And I'm assuming that these systems do all that beautifully, correct?
Oh boy, I could. Yes and no. So we have these. I wish I could show you this graphic of how dynamic our system is. I call it a schizophrenic grid. We have a highly variable supply, because even run-of-the-river hydro, you have several pieces. You got your snow melt in the spring, then it warms up and your glacier starts melting. Then in the fall, you get your big rainstorms. But your water output, depending on how fast the sun's melting the glacier and how hard it starts raining, can fluctuate wildly. So you have this crazy power supply, and then you have this crazy power demand. All the fish arrive at the processors at the same time, and you go from 3 megawatts a load to 8 megawatts a load in a half an hour. So it is quite a bucking bronco to try to ride that grid and stabilize it. And we found a way to deflect our hydropower and very quickly move these deflectors in and out, so more water is hitting the turbine. And we were able to balance our grid like that, but we kind of became a victim of our own success. We had all this abundant low-cost hydropower. All the seafood started coming across the docks into town, and we quickly outgrew our capacity. So here we are wasting a bunch of our hydro capacity trying to balance this grid, and frankly burning a bunch of diesel again to try to keep our system stable. So.
Oh wow! And are there any thoughts? So can you all help power, for example, any of the nearby towns, or is it so remote that that's not physically possible?
Well, not yet. We do have villages and communities, but they're the next nearest communities north and south are about 60 miles either direction. We have Yakutat down the coast, but you've got 10, 15, 18,000 foot mountains on the uplands, and then you've got ocean with all kinds of challenges is another route. Super expensive to push the relatively small amounts of power back and forth. So it really isn't feasible yet to connect.
Hey, Phil, I've got a question. John mentioned before a microgrid, but tell us a little bit about this technology and how, first of all, it's incredibly sustainable. And secondly, micro is probably not the right word, because you absolutely, this can power more than just a city of 3,000. So tell us about how this could expand in the future and the sustainability of it.
Yeah, sure. I mean, in terms of sustainability, like Clay said, the river's not always flowing. If you're using wind or solar, the wind's not always blowing. I guess it is for you, John, today, but not always. And the sun's not always shining. So regulating both the production and capture electricity, but also, like Clay said, the demand can change pretty significantly as well. So what these grid edge solutions, in this case, the battery energy storage systems, what those systems do is help regulate both the production and then also the distribution of electricity, makes the grid more resilient, and also optimizes the use of the renewable energy sources. So it's very important for sustainability. And as you said, it's not just for, these are called microgrid solutions, but it's not just for a small community or maybe a commercial or industrial user, but it can also be used on a pretty large scale. So I think Cordova, Clay, you have a little over 7 megawatts of hydro capacity, correct?
Yeah, just over 7 megawatts.
We've worked with a company called Electronet in Southern Australia that has a wind farm of 91 megawatts. And they're a transmission company. So, they're transmitting electricity all over South Australia, which, if you're familiar with the states in Australia, it's a pretty big, and vast network. And they're using it not just to optimize the production from the wind farm, but also to make sure that the transmission line, the transmission grid, is highly available. They had a lot of issues with outages from lightning strikes. And so the system there, the grid edge battery energy storage system, helps them, not only manage the flow from that wind farm, but also provide resilience to the overall grid. So it can be used on a pretty massive scale for not just small groups like Cordova, but large, vast environments like Southern Australia.
And these systems, from a predictive analytics perspective, right? So at certain times of the year, I can't imagine in Cordova, Clay, that it's not a life or death situation if there's no power. Quite frankly, if people want to have power to their house and things like that, right? So I'm assuming the name of the game is obviously minimizing outages, and I just wanted to sort of understand how you all are managing that and mitigating when things like that happen, right? I mean, are there contingency plans, or do you get enough early warning that you can do something to help increase what the battery is going to hold people over? I mean, how does that work, right?
That's a good point. And yeah, it's not necessarily a life safety issue here in Cordova. I mean, if you have someone at your local hospital who's on life, equipment, real essential equipment maybe, but we have really mild temperatures here. We sit right on the Pacific Ocean, so very unusual for us to get below 0 Fahrenheit. Very unusual to get above 70 degrees Fahrenheit. Real mild climate. In fact,
I don't know. 0 degrees sounds pretty cold to me.
It's all relative, right?
It is.
So we just bundle up there. But the battery energy storage system was for two things. One, because we have 100% underground power lines, we already have incredibly reliable power. Yeah. In fact, it really gets difficult to improve the resiliency on just keeping the lights on. Then it becomes more a matter of when you do have an outage or a disruption, how do you keep your most essential loads on that hospital, for example, and so forth. So what the battery energy storage system really does for us is it replaces that grid balancing. We were deflecting 500 to 700 kilowatts of renewable energy and burning diesel at the same time. The diesels were stabilizing the system. And I mean, the hydro would be stabilizing the system. When we ran out of enough hydro, we'd have to run a diesel and spill hydro. So the battery started balancing our system for us. And that does come with an element of reliability. It can respond so quickly. You don't have the physical devices out on your hydro plant, but what it really did is unlocked all that hydro capacity. I say our battery installation was like building a new hydro plant, 750 kilowatt hydro plant. To put that in perspective, that's like 2 Walmart superstores, every device in the place on running. So it can be half or a third of our whole system's load. So we're talking about a really game-changing liberation, and measured in gallons, which we like to measure our successes. 57,000 gallons of diesel fuel saved last year because of our Hitachi battery system. And
wow. Yeah. Hey, this brings up a good point, Clay, that, 56,000 gallons saved. Sometimes, we talk about sustainability and saving the planet, but it's like, I want to save the planet as long as it's not too inconvenient and it doesn't cost me too much. But this sounds like actually Hitachi has created a solution that not only is good for the environment, but actually is profitable for you, Clay, and your community. Tell us a little bit about like the savings and the efficiencies. I know this has obviously been a savings for you.
Oh, absolutely. The battery system is more than paying for itself, even with our sponsorship from the Department of Energy, even with our annual debt service to pay it down. The fuel savings are more than paying all the partnership funding we got from Department of Energy and Cordova's investment in the system. And so and we're developing new value streams. So, these little microgrids in Alaska are world leaders. A sixth of the world's microgrids are housed in Alaska. Most of our utilities, even what we call the rail belt, our big utilities connecting Fairbanks all the way down to Kenai Peninsula, are really several microgrids that are kind of weakly connected to each other. So we've been developing this technology. My family homestead in Kansas had electricity on their farm 40 years after Cordova, Alaska did. So we've been operating a microgrid for almost 120 years here. And the Department of Energy realized, hey, we recognize the resiliency and the benefit of these microgrids, and they started looking to Alaska for that technology. So we hosted the largest grid modernization project in the country here in Cordova. And with Hitachi's partnership and their world-class controls and engineering technical staff, we're developing new use cases for the battery energy storage system, even while we talk here.
Wow. So I can imagine, given this great success story, that tons of other people are reaching out to you guys, Clay and Phil, and saying, "Let's talk about this. How do we do this in our city as well?" Right? They've got to be.
Absolutely. We're hosting the Electrify Alaska conference this week. We have Chugach Electric, Homer Electric, Matanuska Electric, Golden Valley Electric, all the rail belt utilities. 2/3 of the ratepayers in Alaska are represented at this conference we're hosting here this week, focused on battery energy storage. Hitachi is the platinum sponsor for that conference. We just had a dinner last night and are networking. So yeah, tremendous interest inside the state, and the U.S. State Department has sent us to Greenland, to Arctic Canada. Of course, I serve on a federal advisory committee for the Department of Energy, and this is one of the biggest successes is this use of our battery energy storage system to revolutionize our grid here.
So let me ask another question. I just was thinking about this. And so this is a dramatic change away from diesel, right? And obviously you all have fared well and it makes sense. And I think nobody could say this wasn't worth it. I mean, absolutely. It had ROI and everything's good. It's environmentally sustainable, all those things. But still, it was a change. It was a change. And I'd love to hear you guys talk about your perspective on how did you manage that change? I mean, now looking back, it's probably easier because you've been doing this for quite some time. But when it first came up and you started talking about moving away from diesel and into hydro, were people worried and afraid and, oh, it's always been done this other way? I'm just curious how the change sort of went.
This is Frontier Alaska. This is a fishing community. Guys get in their fishing boat and go out in the Gulf of Alaska to fish. They're kind of taking some risks every single time they step in their boat. So, we've got a small locally elected board of directors that govern the direction of the utility. Great thing about Alaska and in a cooperative is, like I say, our customers own everything from the toaster to the hydroelectric plant. It's owned by the ratepayers. So when they go to their board and said, keep the lights on, doggone it, and the board says, let's have underground power lines to get there, we can go do that. We don't argue about the expense or anything. And so we're not afraid to try new things, and we don't have a lot to work with. We've got limited resources. Sometimes it's duct tape and baling wire, and we get things working. And then others look at it and said, how the heck did you do that?
Yeah. Phil, how do you, so to go further in that question, because I think it's a good one, how do we start helping other cities in the Americas? Because I know you're working in Australia. How do we start helping other cities in the Americas utilize what Clay and Cordova has been doing successfully? How can we start getting other cities up and running on this?
Look, I think it's a good question and an important point. I was just reading in the New York Times this morning, there's an article about how, a lot of homeowners are investing in rooftop solar and they can't connect it to the network. They can't connect it to the grid because there's not enough resilience in the grid. So these kind of solutions provide more resilience in the grid and allow us to, like we've been talking about, optimize renewables. And it's a timely topic with COP26 happening next week. A lot of our Hitachi leadership is going to be at that conference, and it's obviously an important topic. I think not to be too trite, but for the world. So very timely to be able to. I can't imagine something worse than investing in solar and trying to do the right thing for the planet and not being able to utilize that investment.
Yeah. No, I've got solar. I just installed it this year, and I transitioned from a oil furnace to an electric furnace that's running off of the solar.
Yeah.
But again, is I did it because I want to be good to the planet, and I'm also saving a tremendous amount of money. So I think there's this happy balance, and I think Phil Hitachi's finally gotten to that spot where we can have sustainability and still save money and or generate income or make things more efficient. And that wasn't the case, 15, 20 years ago. But it seems like that kind of we're over that hump. It's crossing the chasm, right, on efficient energy.
Absolutely. In Hitachi, we talk about social innovation. We want to be a social innovation business. And I think in the past, like you say, John, it was, do you do good or, for the planet, or do you do good for your shareholders? And I think, now you can do both. That's our mission. And I think, Clay, you talked about the cost savings, but I think there was also some new revenue generation opportunities for you with the system. Is that right?
Oh yeah, we haven't even talked about what this did for our economy. We had a 4 megawatt peak when we built our Powell Creek hydroelectric project. So we build this, as Phil said, 7 megawatts of hydro. So we finally came upon a rate structure and said, well, the processors have never bought more than 400,000 kilowatt hours. So we said, hey, once you hit that 400,000 kilowatt hour threshold, power has become 6 cents a kilowatt hour. And so they installed tens of millions of dollars of super high capacity, high efficiency, flash freezing and canning equipment. And those floating processors offshore that frankly come with their own environmental and social challenges, that seafood all started coming onshore, where you start building, it's almost like a business incubator. You have all these support businesses that start growing. When that fish crosses the dock in Alaska, it generates 3% raw fish tax for the community. So all of a sudden we went from $500,000 of raw fish tax a year to as much as $1.5 million of raw fish tax. That's just Cordova's half, and then the state of Alaska. So the state of Alaska invested in this new hydro project. They paid for half of it. Then we worked with our local tribes to get Indian Energy Act funding through it. Well, all of those investments, grant funding, paid back just in tax revenues to the government. And then our tribe has lease values. So just everything that project touched, that's how we catapulted from the 26th largest seafood port in the country to the 11th largest. And we're delivering that seafood more sustainably, on the processor side and the community side. It just really unlocked and underscored and supported our existing economy. And that's not done yet. We've got a whole new tranche with this coming blue economy that will really result in more sustainability, cleaner work in the oceans, and unlock a lot of new opportunities.
And Clay, when you think about it too, this is super important, because if we don't start thinking smarter about sustainability, the copper salmon is going to be at risk, right? And other things. So I'm not going to be able to enjoy my lox like I am this morning. That's a real issue, right?
Yeah, absolutely. No, Alaska has extremely well-managed fisheries. We have some of the most pristine environments and some of the last super healthy wild stocks on the planet. So we don't allow finfish farming in the state of Alaska. That has environmental challenges. And what we've really been able to do is increase the value of our seafood. That's a quality product. You're probably not going to eat that for breakfast every single morning, John, as much as you'd like to. I can't even eat it for breakfast every morning.
I don't know. Now that you turned him on to it, he may order it every week.
Yeah, I just already placed another order, so this is coming. So let's put up the website if people want to order some seafood from Cordova direct, just like I did. We've got a link there for CNAC.com, and you guys can definitely, listeners can enjoy some of the amazing salmon that's coming out. And again, halibut. There was another fish in there, sable fish spread. Oh my God, incredible.
Yeah. I just tried that at our conference. See, all of our seafood processors donated seafood to the conference. All the attendees are saying it's the best food they've ever had at a conference.
So now I have to ask, though. I have to ask the billion-dollar question. So you're a fishing community, but do you all eat a lot of the fish, or do you get tired of it? You know what I'm saying, right?
I'm surprised I don't have scales. I could eat salmon breakfast, morning, and evening just about every day of the year.
Oh, that's cool. That's cool.
Of course,
well, I think we need definitely it's going to be important. We should do an update sometime next year, Phil, on kind of some other projects that you're working on globally. This is super important. As we think about things, I want to be able to save money and eat my salmon too. And so it's really critical that we that Hitachi, continues on this mission to help communities, big and small, with their energy sources.
Yeah, you'll definitely be hearing a lot more from us on this topic. And one area you'll hear more about in the future is what we call V2G, or vehicle to grid. So if you think about like a large fleet of buses, or maybe in Clay and Cordova's case, a large fleet of boats, how do you not only charge that fleet of e-buses or e-boats, but how do you use that battery capacity to help put power back onto the grid at the right time? And you talked about predictive.
Wow.
What about some of the predictive capabilities? So you can look at the bus schedules, you can look at the state of charge of the batteries, you can look at the potential issues with feeder capacity on the grid, but you can also look at weather forecasts and pricing forecasts on the grid, and try to predict how to optimize things in the network.
Wow, that's really cool.
Incredible.
That's cool. I'd never thought about that. I mean, how do you save some of that stuff up on some of these vehicles or boats and then put it back into the grid? That's pretty cool.
That's amazing. Electric boats is something I wasn't thinking of, but now you got my wheels turning. So
not Disneyland, but
good. Well, thank you guys so much, Phil and Clay. Appreciate you both being on the show today. This has been incredibly educational for us and for our listeners. And I'm going to continue to enjoy my amazing breakfast here, which is just absolutely spectacular. So we'll hopefully get you guys back on in a year and get an update of what's going on next year.
And maybe next time we can do it in Cordova.
That would be wonderful.
I love it. There you go.
That'd be wonderful. Thank you, Clay. Thank you, Phil.
All right. Thank you.
Take care.
Thanks, guys. Wow, what an amazing story. And, it's funny, John, because, most of us either live in or near a really large city. So we don't even think about what it's like to live in a community of like under 3,000 people and, that's so isolated. And I just think it's really, it puts things in perspective. It really puts things in perspective. And this isn't another country. This is still the United States.
Yeah, it's still the United States. And it helps us. It reminds us again is the importance is Cordova's doing it to save money, to be more efficient, to have more reliable energy, but also to save their industry, which is fishing.
Yeah.
And so as we think about kind of where we live and global warming, et cetera, it's not a political issue. It's an issue of saying, how do we just be more efficient? And Hitachi's really a leader in this area with this battery technology. And the V2G thing, I just can't wait to learn more about that. I think that vehicle to grid is an incredible idea.
It's fascinating. It's really, really fascinating.
Hey, one other small fact too, John, before you tell us kind of the show that we have coming up in 2 weeks is just so you don't feel bad in Texas is if you cut Alaska in half, Texas would still be the third largest state in the Americas.
I love it. I love it.
Who do we got coming up?
There's always a competition between those two states about who's the biggest and who's the best. So great show today. This is a lot of fun. So episode 16 coming up on the 16th of November, 2 weeks from today. And we're going to have Nelson Moe on, and he heads up and is the CIO for Virginia Information Technology Agency. And he's going to talk about the incredible experience that they just went through from a cloud migration perspective. Everyone talks about cloud and hybrid cloud, and he's going to say what it's been like to actually go through this migration. They've just finished it up. And I think it's going to be a fascinating conversation.
Absolutely, John. And from what I remember is it's over a $700 million infrastructure. So it's not
Exactly. So,
yeah. That's going to be a great show. Listen, good luck with the wins. I hope
thank you so much.
Okay.
Thank you and enjoy your locks. Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.